How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your September 2019 horoscope for Cancer, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. To jump right into it, we're starting September off with Mars conjoining the Sun in Virgo. Now, as you guys should know, or as you guys should all know, Mars is the planet of action, our drive, where we're putting our energy and our tensions in. Mars is a malefic planet, so it does heat things up, it does burn, sever, and cut, and causes some problems like anger and frustration. However, as Mars is in Virgo, where it's wanting to focus on the specifics and be detailed oriented and focusing on what tasks is ahead of it, Mars conjoining the Sun is kind of like Mars getting purified by fire and getting put into the light in a sense. And while Mars is conjoining the Sun, this is kind of like a revamp of your energy. And while it's in Virgo, this is a mutable sign, so it is of change. And this is kind of like, where do you need to change your actions and better align them that I can more focus on the specifics that need to be attended to. Now, in this horoscope, we're going to be talking a lot about the sign Virgo. So Virgo rules your guys' third house. So we're going to be talking a lot about the third house. The third house has a lot of different rulerships. The third house rules siblings, neighbors, things in your immediate proximity. This rules short distance travel. This also rules education. The ninth house is kind of like higher education, like college, where the third house is more menial education or teaching. The third house also rules, I think I already said this, but siblings. But the third house also has a lot of mercurial aspects, such as communication, our writing style, and our speaking style. A good way to look at the third house, and this is the frame or the lens that I'm really going to use for this horoscope, is the third house is really how you utilize yourself. You know, the first house is who you are, the second house is what you have, and the third house is how you use it. So while Mars is conjoining the Sun here in Virgo and in your third house, this is kind of a good time to really look at where do you need to really direct your energy and how can you really utilize this in the sense of, you know, what needs to be task focused, where do you need to detail and plan. Now, as we move forward, 2 days later is when we're going to have Mercury conjoin the Sun. And this is really important because Virgo rules, or Mercury rules the sign Virgo. So Mercury is in its home sign where now it's getting, being conjoined by the Sun and going Cazimi. This is where, again, Mercury is being purified by fire, and at this time, Mercury is kind of like, you know, what do I need to focus on? What do I need to be attentive to? How do I need to say things and where do they need to be said? Mercury is strong right now in its home sign of Virgo and will be strong as it continues to move forward. But as Mercury conjoins the Sun here on September 3rd, this is a really good time to really look at all of the details and the information that has been presented to you. And the question really comes up as, what are you going to do about it? Or what are you going to do with it? Then through September 4th, 7th, and 10th is when we're going to have Venus, then Mercury, and then the Sun all oppose Neptune. And so with Venus being in Virgo, this is her sign of fall. She doesn't work as well right here. She's not as fun or as exuberant. But Venus in Virgo is wanting to focus on the details and the specifics and make it all really look good. The only problem is Venus can get a little bit overwhelmed with this and not have the time to take to make things actually, you know, impressionable or look good. And while Venus is in your third house, where it is kind of focusing on where you're placing your value, what are you doing with your value, spreading more value, love, Venusian type things within that third house, Venus opposing Neptune, it's kind of like, you know, it can be a little bit foggy and unclear about what exactly it is that you want to do versus what you believe you can do. You see, Neptune is all about our illusion, it's all about mysticism and duality. And while it is in the sign of Pisces, that fog or that blur can be really saturated and contrasted. That's happening in your ninth house of your spiritual beliefs, far distance travel, higher education, publishing, religion, spirituality. And so while Venus is opposing Neptune here, I think this becomes about a balance of really looking at what matters and what's valuable to hear right now versus not questioning the things that you don't know, and really relying on and finding value in the things you already know. Then after that, Mercury will be opposing Neptune, and I think this is where that sense of clarity and that sense of, you know, getting the picture right and kind of like starting to make sense of all of the, you know, evidence or make sense of all of the information that you've collected to where you can actually start perceiving, you know, what exactly it is that you want to do versus real, like where you shouldn't really be wasting your time. Then by the time we get to September 10th, when the sun does oppose Neptune, I think this is really about bringing into illumination what is mystery, what is, kind of confusing, what doesn't really make sense, and seeing more of the things that do make sense, and being able to see and understand more of the smaller steps that you can do right now and take right now that are going to eventually lead you down to the bigger goals that you're trying to make. And then on September 13th, that's when we have Mercury conjoining Venus. And I think that this is important because while Venus is in her fall in Virgo, we have the ruling planet of Virgo, Mercury, here conjoining Venus. And this is kind of like Mercury, saying what it needs to say to Venus and kind of speaking that out. And Venus right now is in Virgo, and it's like in the third house of like stuff you already know, stuff that you're already good at. How do you, finesse, and how do you utilize yourself? Like literally, like what are you doing? And as Mercury conjoins Venus, this is kind of like a wake-up call of like, I'm starting to really see how me placing my value in these specific things, taking one step at a time can actually lead to something bigger. And as Mercury does conjoin Venus, this is a really good opportunity to really look at what, information you have and how creative you can go about, doing something with it. But also on September 13th is when we have the full moon in Pisces. Now, this is when we have both of the luminaries lit up, so there's a lot to be seen, there's a lot to be understood here, and the moon's going to be in Pisces in your 9th house. And you know how we just talked about the 3rd house is like how you utilize what you have and who you are, and the 9th house is about spirituality, religion, far distance travel, foreign cultures, higher education. This full moon's kind of highlighting this dynamic and kind of making you look at like, hey, this is what you can do, and this is what you have been doing. This full moon's kind of going, if you can do these small menial things that, might be annoying, that might be frustrating, Mars is in Virgo, Venus is in Virgo. This full moon's kind of like, well, if you can do those things, what else can you do? What else is possible for you guys? What else are you able to believe? What else are you able to explore? And I think that this full moon in Pisces is a really good opportunity to give yourself some credit and really look at what smaller action steps have you been taking now, and what does that mean for you in the future. Then on September 14th, the next day, is when we're going to have both Mercury and Venus, while they're still conjoining each other, move into Libra. Now this is really exciting because although Mercury was in its home sign of Virgo when it was there, and Venus was in her sign of fall, Venus now gets to go to her sign of domicile, where Venus is in her own home. She can do what she wants. Venus is the planet, of course, of love and money and relationships and connecting things together and, being a little bit more chill, finding, solutions to problems and being more easygoing. While Venus is in Libra, she's looking to delegate, she's looking to balance, she's looking to bring, rules and regulations in the sense of, how we as people relate, how we as people work together. And I think while Venus is in Libra, this is about bringing things together and connecting. While Mercury goes into Libra at the same time, this is about vocalizing those things and being able to have a little bit more diplomacy and being able to be a little bit more level-headed with how we are communicating with one another. Now, this is entering your 4th house, and the 4th house is all about your home, your family, where you center yourself, your private life, and what goes on underneath. And so as Mercury conjoins Venus going on in September, this is kind of like a time to really go, hey, where do I want to bring more value into my living space? Where do I want to bring more value with where I center myself? How are your ideas and how are you going to vocalize more of those concepts to the people that you have around you, especially like your family? Now, as Mercury does conjoin Venus going into Libra, I think that this is going to be kind of an interesting little taste, or a flavor, I should say. But as it goes into your 4th house, I think this is a really positive time to really focus on where do you need to bring balance to this area? Where do you need to find some compromise? Where do you need to bring, a touch of life and a touch of value and a splurge of luxury? Because while Mercury is in Libra, your mind's going to be focused on this area, and you're going to be talking about this area a lot. But also on September 14th is when we have Mars oppose Neptune. And while Mars is still in Virgo in your 3rd house, where you're still, executing, still being detailed oriented, Mars opposing Neptune is kind of like being able to decipher between what is worth your time and what is worth paying attention to detail to, and really what you can kind of get away with without having to put all your drive and focus into those things. Mars in Virgo can get kind of overwhelmed and get analysis paralysis from all of the information that it has and all that it wants to do. So I think while Mars is opposing Neptune, this is a really good time to look at what is worth putting your attention to and what's kind of like not even real, what's not truthful, what's not accurate data. Then on September 18th, we finally have Saturn stationing direct, and I'm sure you guys have been looking forward to this all year since you've had Saturn either opposing your sun or rocking your DC in your 7th house. Now, as Saturn does station direct, this is after the time that we had Mars and Venus and Mercury all trine Saturn, which is really constructive and positive. But as Saturn is stationing direct, this comes down to what restrictions, or I don't know what restrictions, but what lessons were we taught as Saturn was retrograde? What responsibilities were brought to us and given to us? And as Saturn stations direct now, it's kind of like, how are we going to hold ourselves, not only accountable but also capable of establishing, that could be better rules, better boundaries, better, a sense of organization and structure to your relationships. But for many of you, Saturn's not as friendly. Saturn is, maybe you have a night chart and Saturn's like, your maleficent sect. Saturn is, about boundaries, it's about limitations, it's about discipline and authority and problems. And as Saturn's been in your 7th house, there's been a lot of achiness and slow goingness and suckiness in your 7th house. And as Saturn stations direct, this is more of the time of not necessarily bringing more problems or necessarily making anything out of the ordinary, but this is the time where if you want to get out of those situations and you're wanting to put a handle on them, you have a better chance to. While Saturn was retrograde, it was kind of like having to deal with the responsibilities that Saturn was giving us, having to learn something new and go over that and, adapt to it. Saturn stationing direct and moving forward is like, now that I've learned this lesson, I actually have to apply it to real world circumstances. So what have you guys learned in the past few months about relationships, and what are you guys going to apply to relationships now that you've learned those things? Then on September 21st, we have Jupiter finally making its last square to Neptune. Now, this transit has been happening all year, and it is more of one of these bigger level transits. And Jupiter, with it exactly squaring Neptune now, I think that this is a little bit more, different than it was before. When Jupiter squared Neptune the first time, it was like, I don't know what the truth is. Jupiter squared Neptune the second time, where it's like, things are starting to be questioned and answers are starting to arrive. And as Jupiter makes that third square to Neptune, this is kind of like the truth prevailing over the misinformation and the things that really don't make sense and the things that really are kind of blurry and just kind of like, don't have any tangibility. Now, Jupiter is now direct and going through your 6th house, so this is helping you guys become a little bit more busy, be a little bit more healthy, focus on your habits and your behaviors and trying to bring more onto you with that. But as it squares Neptune while it's transiting your 9th house, I think this is a big thing to look at. What are you incorporating and what are you bringing into your day-to-day routine and into your life? And how is that really going against some things that you might have believed that weren't always necessarily honest? Then on September 23rd, we have the Sun moving into Libra, where the main luminary is going into your 4th house and focusing on, bringing together, connecting, and balancing the situation that you could be going on with your 4th house. But while the luminary's there, this is just where the light's being brought to, and this is where your experience of life can be a little bit more focused on. Then on September 25th, we have Venus squaring Saturn. And the only reason I brought this up is because Venus squaring Saturn can be pretty rough. And this is pretty, you guys are cardinal signs here, so this is, impacting you more specifically. But as Venus is going through Libra and wanting to connect and wanting to have, bring justice in a sense of, equality to, how you organize your home life, how your relationship is with your parents or your heritage or your living situation, that could even be your roommates. As Venus is squaring Saturn, it may be hard to connect those things with Saturn kind of bringing a block or bringing a no to it. And even though Venus is wanting to indulge and have a nice time within these relationships, Saturn's kind of going like, hey, if you want to bring this connection on a peaceful level, something that makes sense, maybe it's time to really start, working on better rules, working on better boundaries, and a better sense of being more clear on really what relationships look like for you guys. And while this Venus is going through your 4th house of family, living situation, and Saturn's in your 7th house of relationships, this looks a little bit like what was the word I just used? Like, not consolidating, but bringing together in relationships, getting over things, being able to find some way to connect or to agree. I still can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, but that's okay. I think you guys get the picture. But Venus squaring Saturn is usually a little bit rough. It's kind of depressing in some sense, but the good news is that Venus is in its domicile and it's in a superior square to Saturn. So it really is just about, how much harmony are you trying to bring to this versus when are you trying to put up a big wall? And then we end September on September 28th with the new moon in Libra. And this is going on through your 4th house of your home and your family and really where and how you center yourself. And with this being in Libra, this is kind of like bringing the balance to both sides of going like, hey, I need a little bit of this and I need a little bit of that. And while it's squaring Saturn, this can be a little bit tense because it's having to deal with a lot of the one-on-one relationships you have in your life. But I think what's exciting about this new moon is that it's giving, while, it is going to be next to Venus, it is going to be next to the sun, this is going to be, next to Mercury, this is going to be a time of refreshing, balance and air, like a nice breeze, a nice fall breeze being brought into the house for you guys. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next month.